Tad, good to have you tonight.
Thank you, Jonathan, for having me. And hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us and learn about something that could really make a big difference in your future.
Now let's take over quickly on the market landscape and trends. So yes, the market landscape, obviously, for the past 5 years, I think we all been hoping for having a break. Same with the COVID pandemic. At the offset of the COVID pandemic, I remember being in Singapore, very happy, very joyous. We thought like the world was coming back. Then we got the Ukraine situation. Then, like 2 years later, we got the Israel situation. And now we got the global trade war that has definitely canned on. At the same time, we have like, from an outer perspective, we could even argue like some kind of crazy politics in the US happening with immigration. I know a lot of my applicants were a bit concerned about this. And the thing is this, there is still a very strong North America and specifically like a very strong United States, right? When we look at the students visa situation, yes, we've seen the numbers of being like of number of visas that have been revoked, but we also investigated, and the truth is like the vast majority, if not all of those visas were basically tied to people who protested. Now, definitely like a shift for like the country of free speech, but I think as someone who's been living in Asia, in Singapore for most of the past 20 years, like you need to make concession when you live overseas. Like there are rules that you need to follow and the rules will evolve. The China pivots obviously is something important, but when we look at China as an undergraduate destination, there is the language component. We do not recommend people to go to China if they don't speak Chinese. And also China, I had the chance to live in from 2005 to 2007 and then from 2011 to 2015 is a very different China than today. I think it was much easier at my time to find a job as a foreigner than it is today. They had upskilled tremendously, obviously. Some of the smartest people are Chinese. You have some of the best engineering school, business school over there. So China is definitely something we look at an alternative option in some cases, but definitely not the primary option, including for like Asian students. The rise of the global south, something that has been the case for the past 10, 20 years and that will continue. And we know that some of those countries are going to challenge the US domination, starting with India, obviously, and there will be opportunities there. But again, what we've seen from our India-based applicant is the top Indian business school remain more like a secondary option. They will still try to best get into top US schools. The US still has, for Chinese, for Indian applicants, for the rest of the world, still dominates discussion when it comes to where to study, especially for an MBA. It's very rare that we have someone coming to us asking for just the EU. The US usually is really on top of the game. Now, what's very interesting for tonight's session is like the growth obviously in ASEAN. So what we've seen is like a lot of opportunities for covering the graduates from ASEAN. So that's very true for consulting. So we've seen a massive shift like around 10 years ago-ish, all the top consulting firms like Bain, McKinsey, BCG, for example, opened a Jakarta office. And we've seen a huge influx of top US MBA graduates from Indonesia basically being recruited on campus in the US and then being basically stuck into the Indonesian office to really grow this. But we also see a slowdown recently because of more regulation. The market has slowed down a little bit as well. So that's definitely going to be something interesting. Now, EU is a bit of a wild card. The graduate scheme in the UK, I mean EU plus UK. The UK is not part of the EU anymore, obviously. Prime Minister Sunak almost revoked the graduate scheme for top graduate students in the UK that allows them to work for 2 years. Still exist. In EU, there are definitely opportunities. Germany, for example, is a very dynamic job market. I think they haven't made enough babies, right? So like it's something like they need immigrants, they need talent to come here. And obviously like the cost of an MBA in Germany is lower, opportunities exist. But then again, what about the long-term game? Do I still want to get a good brand on my CV? Because no offense, I love ESMT, it's a great school in Berlin, but it doesn't have the prestige of a Tepper, of a Kellogg, of a Duke on your CV. And people don't just think about the short-term value, but the long-term value. And I think that we'll discuss this when it comes to investment. Like if you want to become an entrepreneur one day, your alumni network is going to be one of the first line of offense to find your seed investment or your family and friends. And that's something people really think increasingly about. So I would say those are like the major geopolitical drivers, but as we mentioned earlier, like very unpredictable. I think it's like the scary part of the world we're living in today. We're not entirely sure what's going to happen tomorrow, but I think it's also beauty. One thing I would like to re-emphasize on, though, I think we definitely entering a slowdown economically. I think there is no doubt about this. And I think Tad, you would agree with me on this, and I would love to hear your thoughts quickly on this. The GFC graduates, those who graduated in 2008, 9, 10, 11, have been some of the most successful MBA graduates over the years. Why? Because the credit crisis, the access to smartphones and internet access, and remember, like having an iPhone in front of you, that's fairly recent. 2008, we didn't have. We just had the whole flip phone, Motorola, it was just the start of it. And those factors basically created the gig economy. So if you look at 2010 and onwards, it's Airbnb, it's Uber, it's all of those platforms that were created and that created so many jobs for MBA, so many opportunities. I was talking to Tad about Anthony Tan here in Southeast Asia, who basically built the Uber of Southeast Asia, acquire Uber Southeast Asia operations after 4 years max, I think, since started the company. Yeah, I think it started in 2012, 2016, he acquired Uber or something around there. And that was the era of a slowdown economically. So I like to approach economic slowdown as the best time to go for business school, because at the moment, a lot of industries are being reinvented even more. And that would be like the main points of discussion tonight with AI. What's going on with AI? What's the next move with AI? How are we going to integrate this in our daily life? And that we will hear a lot from Tad very shortly. Projected hiring demand for MBA is stronger than ever. It's always been the case. If you look at the past 20 years, if you look at the GMAC reports for top masters in business, including the MSB, I think, Tad, you would like to talk about the MSB as well. Very good alternative for younger applicants who can very specific roles using data, especially machine learning, AI, and so on. There's always been a demand, but yes, the MBA, if you look at employer projection, is always the second highest degree, just right below the bachelor. So usually bachelor would be 95% globally, and the MBA would be between high 80s, low 90%. And then obviously specials masters are going to drop significantly, mid 50s, 60, 70% at best, because obviously you don't need that many finance function in your finance department. So you will have less demand, whereas the MBA is much more generalist. So the projections are very good. We are not extremely concerned. So yes, you've read those articles. I've talked to my students, obviously. Let me give you an example. I have students who graduated this year from HBS and GSB. Their summer internship wasn't great because last year, for example, McKinsey really slowed down on hiring. In Seattle, they got 10 hires from McKinsey only when they used to have almost 100. So I have students who intern with Deloitte. If you go to HBS and intern with Deloitte, you're definitely going to be a bit disappointed. But then, no, went back to school. McKinsey restarted the recruitment, and it's going to start in a few weeks now at McKinsey New York. So there's been definitely a slowdown last year, but it's picking up again. I'm sure Tad will have similar stats out of the most recent. And yes, the enrollment for MBA is increasing. So the demand is there, both on the students, the number of applicants, and of course, the number of employers looking at hiring MBA students. So I think we should be very bullish, not because we're here to promote business education, but I think as Tad mentioned, an MBA is also a long-term investment, something that will be with you forever. And I think there's one value that is intangible out of an MBA, and that I've seen it with most of my applicants, 99% of them. You'll be surprised, the biggest weakness is the lack of confidence. And I think the transformative power of the MBA, not even once they graduate, during the MBA, I see them transformed. And I think that is the biggest value. And I've seen that at the MBA level, at the master's level, and at the EMBA level. I've worked with people who had 15, 16 years experience who were super good, but they thought they were not good. The one thing they all had, those who reached the top, was self-confidence. Yes, they were smart, they were driven, they were ambitious, hard worker, but one thing they all had, they had a strong self-belief. And I think that is the value number one of a top business education program. So Tad, AI revolution. First question for you. I think this one is an important one, right? What are your views on Gen AI, automation, transforming traditional MBA career paths?
Yeah, great question. It's a topic we talk about every day. I think, to be honest, we're still in that transformation period. When Gen AI came out a couple of years ago, I think we were all wait and see what happened. And from an academic standpoint, initially professors were like, whoa, some of them were anti, let's not use it in the classroom. But I think very quickly from an academic perspective, we realized we have to embrace this. And that means we're going to have to change how we teach and how we evaluate students. I attended a panel of second-year MBAs talking to first-year MBAs recently. One was at Amazon, one was at BCG, and one was at Google. And the question came up, how will I be expected to use AI during my summer internship? And it was interesting, the response the second years gave the first years. They said, AI is used, but every company has a different flavor on how they're using AI. And a lot of what they're offering is internal. So each company, I think, is trying to define how they use AI. It's interesting, the consultant in the room said that some consulting companies, the thought amongst the interns was, if you use AI, you're lazy. So they were cautioning folks to be careful how you use AI in a consulting role. So I think we're seeing it evolve. And I don't think we've really seen a huge impact in career paths. I think creating prompts is very important. Can you create the right kind of prompts? And then ethics. Ethics in AI. How do you ethically use AI in a company, in a business? And then obviously, how do you train the models? So we've implemented an AI component in our admissions, and we've spent 6 months trying to train the model to make sure we get the outcomes that we want. And so that's been an important component. And I think that's something students will really look towards. I will give you a quick example. We have it's called AI Venture Studio, and it's a class, it's interdisciplinary, so anybody from across campus can take it. I just went to the presentation. So there were about 40 different teams. There were about 100 students in the class, about 40 teams. And their job was to use AI to scale up much quicker than a traditional entrepreneurial startup.
Yeah, one point I wanted to jump on. The second instance we were saying if you use AI, you'll be seen as lazy. It's funny because I was thinking a few MBBs recently at an event, and they had a different perspective. We embrace AI. So basically, and I think you nailed it. The difference today is in your ability to prompt your model, right? I think those who know how to use AI the best are those who spend a lot of time. I was telling a colleague of mine recently, I'm like, hey, actually AI doesn't allow me to do 5 times what I used to do before, but it allows me to maybe go 20% faster. Why? Because I spend a lot of time prompting, refining the prompt. And so I would say that's the common feeling among top employers that discuss with is they welcome it. Now, the limitation also is because they don't have access to the open AI models, obviously, for confidentiality reasons. So all of them are developing their own models. Something takes a bit more time. But I think the way we see it and the way we look at it is, I think you guys are right to really embrace it. I think the AI venture shows it is you can scale faster. You can produce content faster. You can produce marketing campaign faster. And I think that's just going to accelerate. But that's bringing me to my next question, Tad. So for the past 3 years, what are the industries that have been experiencing the most significant transformation due to AI?
I think it's a mixed, you'll get different opinions depending on who you talk to. Yeah, so there are some legal jobs that people think are going to be threatened. Recruiting actually could be threatened. Insurance, there could be some threats there. So I think the question is, how do we maximize AI to make sure that we're adding the most value to the customer? Just like you said with the venture studios, this is going to transform entrepreneurship. You're going to scale up much quicker. You're going to fail much quicker. And that's what I saw with the presentations with the students. In one semester, the students had done all their customer discovery. They had a marketing plan, and they were meeting with, we probably had 50 to 60 investors there. So in one semester, they'd gone from idea to pitching to an investor, which in the past didn't happen that quickly.
And is AI something Sense talk a lot about? So you mentioned the question during the panel, right? But is it a daily conversation that people are a bit worried about how to approach it? Is it a common thing, or is not really a concern for most of your students?
You put anything with AI, like a course, you do a seminar, you do a course in AI, and people will flock to it. I think there's a sense that we don't want to get behind. I just think it's still developing. We just rolled out a concentration in AI, and part of that is done in conjunction with the computer science. We have a unique approach that we encourage our students to take classes outside of the business school. I think there's a sense that you should be aware, you should keep up, but that it's still evolving, and we just don't know what it's going to look like.
Okay, and with your 20 years of experience across industries in recruitment, business school, and all, in your opinion, let's say the top 3, maximum top 5 industries that incoming MBA students, prospective applicants should focus in terms of maximizing the career outcome in the next 3 to 5 years.
So here in Pittsburgh, healthcare is a big industry, and AI is transforming healthcare. I wouldn't say healthcare is our strong suit other than the technology lens of healthcare. Tech's been hit this last year. Tech's been hurt, but I think tech is coming back, and I think it will come back. I don't think I think it's a temporary setback. Obviously, consulting, although people say it's being threatened, we still see strong growth in the consulting piece, although consulting was hurt a little bit this last year. What I would tell a student is really you've got to focus on what your strengths are and what you enjoy doing. I know some people say, I want to only work for McKinsey or some other company or Facebook, Amazon. I think students need to be broader in their search, and they really need to focus on what's their core strength and where do they add value. When I was in MBA school, Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he came and spoke, and it was a rough year for placement. And someone asked him, how do we remain competitive in the market? And it's always a question MBA students have. And he said something that I've remembered. He said, there will always be jobs for good people who add value. So he said, cut out the noise, focus on how you add value to an organization. And that's knowing the value that you add and how you communicate that. If you focus on where you can add value and how you communicate that value, you're going to survive.
And if you embrace the changes, I know, so like all the negative articles about the end of consulting. Yes, I would argue that the smaller firms, those that used to service SMEs, yeah, those are definitely like in danger zone. The global firms like McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Deloitte, and all, they're gonna thrive with it. They may reduce number of headcounts because obviously you can do more in a shorter amount of time, but top companies are going to rely on a little bit more than just like a ChatGPT recommendation to steer strategies or restructuring. So I don't think like the big firms are like in any dangers. Yes, we may see like a reduction of number of headcounts. Obviously, that's something that will likely happen, but I don't see the end of consulting as an industry. I don't see the end of many industries that we've been discussing. I mean, that some journalists have discussed. I think like and if it happens, it's not like in our lifetime. That will take much longer to get to that point. So thanks for your insight on this. Now, the impact on the skills globally. Tell us a bit more about how are your top employers navigating the AI revolution, like in their recruitment process. Maybe are they looking for people who know AI, for example? Is it something that when you discuss with your corporate partners, like career services, you hear more and more that, hey, like your grads are great, but we need them to be more like AI fluent, for example. Is it something you've heard?
It's a theme that we hear, but still the basic bread and butter of MBAs, quantitative ability. Can they think quantitatively? Can they use an Excel spreadsheet? Can they analyze data is really still very important. And coupled with really the more qualitative skills. Again, the communication, the self-awareness, the ability to articulate a proposal or try to influence someone. Those are still the top skills that employees are asking for. AI, yes. I think there's an expectation that you've been exposed to AI, you have AI, but I would not put AI ahead of the basic quantitative data analysis. Can you use data to inform your decisions? And can you communicate that in an emotionally intelligent way?
If I may challenge you here then, Tad, what's the purpose of a school like Tepper to have an AI concentration then? Is it to catch a bit more like the market trend in terms of demand from the students, like it's a trendy? Or is it really to also address that needs from like employers then?
So we feel like we have to have a balanced approach. We still are very quantitatively focused in the classroom, and we have a leadership center that focuses heavily on leadership and communication skills. Add that to the curriculum piece of AI. I think there's an expectation that we're at the forefront of AI just because we're Carnegie Mellon, but also we realize there's going to be an impact. But AI is not going to replace quantitative analysis, the ability to use data, and it's not going to replace how we communicate it. So I think you have to have that background, you have to have that knowledge, and you have to understand how to use AI ethically. And that's why we have the concentration. And we'll still advance that.
Would you say the sentiment you just shared about how Tepper basically approach AI is something that is very similar across the board, like across all business schools? Or do you feel that some schools are maybe, and you don't need to name any schools, we're not here to shame anybody, but we'll say that maybe some schools are a bit more passive into that direction and really focusing, as I say, more on the core skills, leadership development, job management, quantitative skills, and some schools may be a bit more at the forefront of it, would you say?
Yeah, I would say that. You're right. We're a member of a group of the top 30 schools. We meet probably every other week, and that's really focused on their career piece. But we do have meetings every 6 months. There are some schools that are sprinkling it across the curriculum. So they're going broad, and there's others that are going deep. And I think we're one of those that are deep, and they're really digging into the curriculum. How are we changing the curriculum? Are we offering specific courses? Are we focusing on a multidisciplinary approach? So some schools are like, you can only take classes in the business school. Just because of our nature of how we were started as a university, students can take any class across the university as long as they meet the prerequisites. So we have students taking machine learning and robotics and all different classes across the spectrum of what's offered here. So I think just because of our DNA, we encourage that cross-disciplinary approach to not only business, but technology and any other aspect that's offered at the university.
Geopolitical tensions. As I said, like we've seen it a bit. We have had more discussion this year than in the previous year about should I go to the US, what about my visa and so on. Have you seen something similar for the past 3 months? Do you see some maybe a bit more worry from like your applicants from international markets than in previous year? Or is it something that actually is just a bit of a noise, but it doesn't really change too much?
So back in the first Trump administration, there was some students who were like, I'm not coming to the US.
Oh, really?
Concerned. Oh, yeah. Yeah. In the first Trump administration back in 16, 17. I thought this year we would see a repeat of that. We have not for our incoming students. With all the concern about visas being revoked, I'm surprised. We have not seen a lot of students back out and say, I'm not coming to the US because of the visa issues. Now, for our current students, there's been some consternation about could my visa be revoked? We did have a few students here at Carnegie Mellon who had their visa revoked, but a judge reinstated them. And so I think that's given us some hope that some of that is going to settle down. We've been working closely with those students, but it's only been a handful, maybe 3 or 4, and they've all been reinstated. But in terms of incoming students, we have not seen an impact overall in our admissions, which makes me very happy.
Good, very good. That's pretty much our view as well. Like when we talk to some families, be it for undergrad or postgrad, our perspective is very similar. It's like the crackdown on immigration is mostly towards like uncontrolled immigration from, let's say, the southern border. I think Trump, even during the campaign trail, toyed the idea of a green card for all graduates. So I think like the international demographic is absolutely not at risk. Now, the only advice I give them, I say, you know what, clean your social media, remove anything that could be like contentious, controversial. I know it's a big concession when you go to a country like the US, but I think that the only advice we give them is to be a bit more careful about what they speak about, the kind of, like just to be a bit more aware that the landscape has changed a bit, at least momentarily, to avoid being maybe too many protests here and there. But what we tell everybody is we don't see national students being at risk anytime soon in the US. It's contributing too much to the economy, and not just in terms of like direct contribution to the GDP, but also staying in the US, working there, starting companies and so on. So we're very, I would say, like cool about this at the moment. And yes, we do have an article on this, so you can visit our website. It's very well written. It's very interesting as well to read. But yeah, we don't feel extremely concerned about this at all.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I think if you take a longer term perspective, you say, I've got a 30-year, 35, 40-year career. There's going to be ups and downs. And I've seen it in my 20 plus years. There's going to be bad economic times. There's going to be unpredictably situations. But I think you have to move forward on learning, growing, adding value, the basics.
I agree. I've been an immigrant for the past 20 years, right? The rule is if I lose my job tomorrow, I have a month to live, like, or finding a new job. When you're an immigrant, you have a lot of opportunities, but you also have more challenges. But challenges equate growth, learning opportunities. So I think people should be bullish about the US. I think Trump administration is very business oriented. They know what they want. We can disagree on like policies, but I think for international students going to at least to top universities, I don't see a single risk today, as long as they just be a bit more careful about what they talk about on social media. Where do you see the greatest demand for MBA talent today? So you mentioned consulting, you mentioned the tech, healthcare, a bit more on the technical side. Yeah. Is there like pockets, like we don't talk a lot about, like smaller industries, like real estate, for example, specific areas where you see maybe like a greater demand coming up?
So I talked to some of our career folks in preparation for this, and they do see tech and consulting coming back. They don't feel like it's going to languish very much longer. But again, we're still waiting to see with the tariffs. There is some thought with some of our alumni that I talked to recently that manufacturing could be coming back. That's being debated. Some people say it will, some people say it won't, but we are seeing some movement in manufacturing, more investment in the US in terms of the manufacturing sector. So there is some thought that operations, manufacturing could be coming back and could be a growth area. And obviously, technology related to AI, we'll see some variations in entrepreneurship. For example, we're seeing more and more students coming in looking to do more in entrepreneurship. And then sustainability is a constant theme, much more mentioned by our students than I've seen in the past. So I think there's a strong interest in the incoming students in anything related to sustainability.
Entrepreneurship is something that a lot of the applicants I work with where aspiring to achieve, not right after the MBA, but more maybe mid to long term, something right after the MBA. Tell us a bit more about the entrepreneurship ecosystem at Tepper. I mean, at Carnegie Mellon, right? Because I think even though it's a bit different than like the topic of the webinars for today, I think that's really interesting for most MBA applicants. They want to hear about entrepreneurship and what you do. So obviously like the AI venture, we touched this a bit. But yes, if you could spend maybe like 2-3 minutes on that, Tepper, CMU and entrepreneurship, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
What I consider a very robust and innovative center is called the Schwartz Center for Entrepreneurship. It's a university-wide center, and it's really the idea is to get all students across the university to participate. We have about 21 different programs through that center, all the way from entrepreneurship through acquisition, corporate startup lab for entrepreneurs. There's all kinds of flavors. We have the Schwartz Fellows, we have the venture competition, we have the AI Venture Studio. So if you are interested in entrepreneurship, I think it really gives you an opportunity to not just a traditional startup, but you can be part of a startup, you can be the founder. So a very robust, including funding that's here.
Excellent. And if I'm not mistaken, CMU produced a very famous, one of the most famous startups in the world, right? Duolingo was homegrown at CMU, yeah?
Yep. And at the headquarters, just 3 blocks from here.
Yeah, I have a few like graduates now who went to work on for Duolingo. So Duolingo is also hiring MBA graduates across the business school. I know that's very cool. Yeah, so entrepreneurship is strong at CMU. So anyone interested in entrepreneurship, please look at CMU. And I think Tad mentioned this. I think it's very important. Interdisciplinary approach is very important from a pedagogical perspective. I'm a big fan of interdisciplinary, and not just Tepper obviously does that, but it's true that some schools do not have that flexibility. And I think having the way to take classes in the School of Computer Science or the School of Sustainability, of Engineering is super interesting. And really, I would say, really widen your perspective and make you like a much stronger MBA graduates than if you just study like pure business. That's also the reason why usually like the best business school for entrepreneurship tends to be much more interdisciplinary than just narrow focus on pure just business. All right, now let's talk about what's your take on the technical and leadership skills that would be non-negotiable from now on, let's say for the next 5 years. Obviously after this we can't predict.
Coming in, like we require calculus of our applicants. So you need calculus because a lot of it that is used in our classwork, and we have a very rigorous quantitative curriculum. So we need people that have that technical acumen. Half of our students are engineers. You don't have to be an engineer to come here, but we're very engineering heavy in our student population. So even if you don't have technical skills, you'll get them when you come here. So that's just a non-negotiable for us. And then we really try and balance that out with the leadership skills through our Accelerate Leadership Center. So we're very coach focused here at Tepper. You'll have a career coach, you'll have a leadership coach, you'll have a communications coach, and you'll have an academic coach. We are not a big program. We have about 160, 170 students that come in every year. So it allows us to take a very personalized approach to that. We just launched a leadership program. In addition to our traditional leadership, the chief risk officer from JP Morgan is a Tepper alum, and he just funded an advanced leadership program. We just launched the Board Fellows program, which puts students on the boards of nonprofits in Pittsburgh to give them a chance to really network with leadership and also learn what it's like to be on a board of directors. So we really have to have both of those. Since COVID, we've noticed that some of the communication skills aren't as strong as they have been. And so we've tried to double down on those basic communication skills, basic networking skills that I think suffered during COVID.
Okay. And so one thing that just caught my ears, you mentioned like 50% of your incoming class tend to be engineers background. Isn't this like the highest among top MBA programs? Because I think even MIT is only, I think 35 or 40%, I think. Are you like one of the highest in the world?
We're probably up there.
And if I were at 20 years younger, much more hair on my head, as a poet, much more than a quant, obviously, would I be able to survive the Tepper like curriculum?
That's a debate we have all the time, because we don't want to send a message that if you're not an engineer, you can't come to Tepper. That's not the case. But at the same time, we want to send the message, we'll help get you ready. It's going to be challenging, so we're going to help you do that. So we have a series of pre-work that we have our students do, because that's just our identity. And so we need people that are ready for the challenge and that we can help get ready for the quantitative rigor that they're going to find here.
I think we discussed this with the discussion, like the kind of post-MBA roles. I would say like very similar to 5 years ago, but with people maybe who embrace a bit more the ability to basically deal with AI, I would say. People who are able to go a bit faster. And as you say, people who keep being, I would say, curious, yes, embracing change and looking at adding value. I think you're absolutely right on this. I think the difference between a good employee and a great employee, I think, at the end of the day, boils on the ability to take initiatives and to create value. And no matter what the circumstances are, there is always an opening to create value. Question number 2, I think it's the most important. I think it's something we have also one question in the Q&A box about this slightly. How is Tepper rethinking traditional course structures, experiential learning, or capstone project or whatsoever in the light of rapid digital transformation?
Yeah. So how we evaluate students has had to change and be transformed because of AI. And so it's not so much as solve this problem, it's giving all this information that's in AI. How would you solve a problem at a higher level? So it's not just calculations anymore. It's a much higher level thinking in how we evaluate students in the classroom. And so professors have had to rapidly change how they evaluate the learning of a student. And I think that's brought us into more experiential learning kinds of discussions. With our capstones, I think we've also been pushed to do more things from an international perspective. So we've had traditional capstones, it's called management game, and we've done that for 30, 40 years. It's management science was born here at Tepper, but our capstones now are really focused more on the experiential learning and from a global perspective. We just sent teams to South Africa, South Korea, and Chile this past semester to do their capstones. And so we're moving away from the traditional, what we call management game simulation, to more hands-on, boots on the ground kinds of experiences for the students.
Excellent. And I'm going to rephrase the big question 3. I think I'm going to phrase it in a more direct way. Let's say if I was 25 and 6 years old, 2-3 years work experience, around there, like 3 years experience, let's say. And I was someone looking at really having a career more like in data analytics and like data science, like really more technical. Should I go for the MSBA at Tepper, or should I go for the MBA at Tepper?
If you had 3 years of experience, I would say the MBA. Our MSBA is really focused on pre-experienced students. I always, when I talk to students, I was just talking to a student from Japan the other day about this. He's got 2 years of experience. He likes the data piece, but it really came down to, do you want to be an individual contributor, or would you want to be more in a leadership role? So our MSBA is really focused on individual contribution, where our MBA is going to focus more on how do I think as a manager? How do I act as a manager? In the end, I really like leading teams. I really want to go more that route. So that's the question I would ask first and foremost.
I was going to ask, like, how much overlap in terms of curriculum, like between the MSB and the MBA, if I really wanted to do more business analytics? Can I get that expertise in business analytics by doing the MBA at Tepper?
You can. So an MSBA is 1 year. They don't get all the fundamentals. It's very focused on the analytics piece, the quantitative piece, and that's 90% of the curriculum. Where the MBA, after you do the basics in the year 1, then you can focus the second year in the analytics, just broader.
Excellent. And I'm going to ask you one last question, Pat. What would you tell like prospective applicants to focus on to really make the application successful?
That's a good question. My recommendation would be to talk to as many people as you can from different perspectives. So that means as you formulate your school list, talk to as many people from different schools to find out what is the culture of that school. Will I fit at that school? Talk to people in industry. Was the MBA a good investment for you? How would you redo the MBA experience? Talk to people at the school. What's important to them? Talk to current students. Sometimes the current crop of people, they're hesitant to reach out and talk to people, but I really feel like you need those perspectives from people from all stakeholders as you create your list of schools to make sure you fit where you're applying, to make sure that your career focus is in the right direction. It's realistic, because that's very important for us. And then you start building that foundational network that is so key and such a valuable part of the business school. So it's something that will continue to pay dividends if you do that.
This is so spot on. I'm 100% agreeing with you on those 2 points. I think number 1, yes, talk to people from the schools you think to apply to. When you look at all the information available online, the curriculum, the experiential learning, what they do, the career placement of the school you're thinking of, but you don't know who you're going to study with. By talking to current students, you still won't know who you're going to study with, but you're going to have a very clear indication of the kind of people you're going to meet when you start your MBA over there. Second of all, you'll be surprised. Every year it happens. I've heard coming with the list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, during school 1, less during school number 5. And then the way we ask them to do, obviously we have our network of students, so we can also introduce here and there, but I always oblige them to go through LinkedIn and basically call, message people. Obviously we find commonality, so same university, same kind of career pre-MBA, and you'll be very surprised that sometimes people come back and say, hey, actually, I put it school 5 now because not a single one replied to me. Whereas school 5, out of 10 invitations, I've got 5 reply. They introduced me to more people. I love the school. And like perception can change very fast. Ranking matters, prestige matters, but the feeling you have when you talk to people, it's the most important. So I agree with you 100%, Tad. And yes, career, every school, when you go at an info station, you read on their website about Columbia has it and so on, they will tell you your long-term goal has to be a dream. Like they like to use the word dream or a bit more inspirational. But your short-term goal better be on the realistic side. I think that you will agree. It is expected of you as an elite MBA applicant to know that some short-term goals that you have are simply not realistic. And you will be eliminated no matter how your GMAT score is, no matter how strong your GPA is, if you put the wrong short-term goal. So typical example, you never work in finance and you say your short-term goal is private equity and private equity only, you're out. Because you're never gonna break into private. We can never say never, but the chances of you breaking into private equity are very close to 0%. And I think, Tad, I need you to tell people about this. A 2-year MBA sounds very long, right? To figure out what you want to do. But the truth is you secure your summer internship in the first few months of your MBA. You don't have 2 years to figure out what you want to do. Yep. What's the percentage at Tepper of people going post-graduation at the company they interned with the previous summer? High 90%, no?
I'd probably say 60 to 65%.
So some people are able to get somewhere. But see, 60-65% already give you the indication. If you're not ready to know what you want to do before you start your MBA, you are in trouble. Like what we do with our applicants, the moment they submit their application, of course, there is a bit of interview prep ongoing, but we move them into career exploration phase where they go to different consulting firm, FANG, everywhere and anywhere they are based in the world. If they look at consulting or investment banking, the moment they have their offers, we start to coach them for the technical interviews, the case studies, because you don't have the time. Exactly, right? So I'm so much with you on those 2 points. I think it's very important. Yes, bling is important. Rankings matters. We're not going to deny that. I think Tepper is very proud to be highly ranked, but it's not sufficient to decide which school you should be attending. Talk to people. That's super, super important. And yes, we have a few questions. What sets the Tepper MBA AI concentration apart from other top business schools offering similar programs such as Kellogg MBA or Wharton MBA with an AI focus?
So I'm not super familiar with their curriculum, but I will say what I think is a little different than what we offer is, one, it's interdisciplinary. So your concentration, you will not just be taking classes at Tepper, but you will also have the opportunity to take classes at our CS program, which in some cases is ranked number 1 or number 2 in the world. So very interdisciplinary approach. We also have a strong focus on ethics in AI. So we have several professors that focus on that area. And so we'll really try and train you not only how to use AI, but how to use it ethically in a business context. I'd say probably those 2 things.
Excellent. And like a question much more about like career, this one. I think some people are a bit worried about post-MBA graduation, but number 1, Tepper is a STEM degree, right, for the MBA?
Right. All our degrees are STEM.
So all degrees are STEM at Tepper, which is brilliant because you have a 3 years OTP, and that is definitely helping a lot. Listen, 3, I don't know how you business school were able to get into that loophole to become STEM certified, but we've seen a massive change. Like the majority of our applicants remain in the US post-MBA, no matter the industry, except for consulting with very specific markets like Japan, China, Indonesia, for example. We tend to see more people being staffed over there because of local expertise, but the overwhelming majority of our past applicants the past 6-7 years have remained in the US. But the question is, what are the best places or regions to relocate for product managers with less difficulty in visa sponsorship, in your opinion, Tad, beside the US?
Oh, outside of the US?
Yes. What would you say? I have an opinion on this.
That's a good question. I would have to guess probably Asia is probably the best answer that I can come up with. I was thinking West Coast, East Coast. We don't get a lot of students from Europe. We have some, but they tend to stay in the US.
Yes.
And I would say most of our international students, because of the investment, will stay in the US. We do have a few that maybe have some connection with family businesses back home, or if they're sponsored, they'll go back. And so I would say Japan, Korea, Thailand, Indonesia are where most of our sponsor students come from. And so most of them, if they're in product management, they would go back to those areas.
I agree. I think, besides just like product management, I think if not the US, you have two engine of growth globally at the moment post MBA. For the US, yes, we mostly see people saying in the US are returning to their home country. That's usually the trend. There is no really, they're not really going to Europe because firms in Europe don't really recruit in US business schools. But I would say, so for the US schools, we see mostly US or home country. That's one of the 99% of the cases. For European school, I'm going to extend a bit on this. We see obviously Europe or Asia, if it's a dual campus like in Seattle. And there's been a rising power, the Gulf regions, with the UAE and Saudi Arabia leading the pack. So for example, consulting, it's been a very slow market in like the mature market, like the US, Singapore, Europe, but Middle East has been growing very fast. So most of the applicants I work with went to INSEAD, stayed in Singapore, got in consulting in Singapore, and it was done, right? Then COVID happened, pandemics, visa regulations had to change across the board, including in very friendly countries like Singapore. Top consulting firms say we don't hire foreigners anymore. And the shift at the same time, the Gulf region were growing very fast. So most of INSEAD grads now would go to like UAE. So I think that remains. And we've seen some school going to the UAE as well because it's fairly attractive, no tax, fast growth, safety and so on. So I think the UAE tide, you will likely start to see some of your Tepper grads moving to the UAE because it's definitely moving fast. UAE/Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, our Indian, and you're right. In fact, come to think of it, we do have a number of our Indian grads that if they can't get placed in the US, like we have a bunch that are in consulting that are in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or so that's true. Usually their first choice is if they could stay in the US, but that has been a default and it's been mostly in consulting actually, but you're right. You're absolutely right.
All right. So I think we touched on everything. Thank you so much, Tad. Like your insight, really, very much appreciated. Super happy to have you tonight, Tad.
I see an MBA change lives every day, and that's what I love what I do. So I hope you'll take all the advice and make it happen. It can change your life.